Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into something that usually makes people want to run for the hills. Yep, we are talking about personal finance. We're going to explore what top financial resources actually say about popular budgeting methods so we can all get a little more control over our money. Budgeting is so often treated like a dirty word, right? Like it's this massive restriction on your freedom. But today, we are going to completely reframe that mindset. Look, if you constantly find yourself eating the crusty end slices of bread by the end of the month because your money seemingly just vanished into thin air, I really want you to know you're not alone. It's kind of become a running joke for a lot of us. The paycheck hits, and before we even realize what happened, we're looking around wondering where it all went. But the reality behind that joke, well, it's actually incredibly stressful. In fact, the severity of this issue is honestly pretty shocking. According to a Federal Reserve study, more than a quarter of American families literally cannot handle a $400 unexpected expense. Let that sink in for a second. Just $400. Whether it's a flat tire or, say, your dishwasher breaks, that relatively small hiccup leaves millions of people perilously close to real financial hardship. We're talking about having to take on high-interest debt or sell off possessions just to keep your head above water. So here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, the paycheck-to-paycheck problem. 2, comparing popular budgeting methods. 3, inside zero-based budgeting. 4, the Dave Ramsey debate. 5, building your emergency fund. And finally, 6, choosing your perfect system. Okay, let's jump right into section 1, the paycheck-to-paycheck problem. Let's look at exactly why so many of us feel stuck in this constant loop of financial anxiety. What's really wild about these numbers is just the sheer volume of people affected. A survey by SunTrust Bank reveals that a staggering 62% of full-time workers live somewhat paycheck to paycheck, and a full 20% live completely paycheck to paycheck. And this is made worse by a penny hoarder survey showing that 48% of Americans only save whatever happens to be left over after the bills are paid. And spoiler alert, usually there's absolutely nothing left over. Without a solid plan, the money just disappears. Moving on to section 2. Comparing popular budgeting methods. To break this cycle, we basically have to rethink our whole approach. We need to find a Goldilocks fit for your unique lifestyle. The penny order synthesizes this landscape beautifully. Check out these options. You've got everything from the extremely low-effort anti-budget using the Monarch app, which is awesome for high earners who just want to automate savings and spend the rest freely, all the way over to the rigorous zero-based approach for control seekers trying to aggressively pay off debt using apps like YNAB. Or hey, maybe you prefer the pay-yourself-first method using Empower, which automatically funnels cash straight to savings on payday. The takeaway here is that there's no single one-size-fits-all answer, but there is absolutely a system out there built for how your brain works. For instance, let's look at the famous 50-30-20 rule. It divides your after-tax income into 3 really simple buckets: 50% for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings. It sounds incredibly easy for beginners, right? But critics actually point out a massive flaw with this one. Average American households often spend way more than 50% on basic needs alone, like housing, food, and transportation. So trying to force your actual life into this strict 50% bucket can completely set you up for failure, especially if you live in an expensive city or happen to have a lower income. Which brings us to section 3, inside zero-based budgeting. So when standard percentages just don't reflect your daily reality, we turn to the absolute heavyweight champion of debt payoff. The crucial point here is the math. Your income minus your expenses equals exactly 0. Instead of just kind of hoping you have money left over at the end of the month, this method demands that you assign every single dollar a very specific job before the month even begins. Savings gets a job, groceries gets a job, debt gets a job. Literally nothing is left unaccounted for, which means accidental spending becomes basically impossible. Fidelity outlines a really crisp 4-step process for this. First, you calculate your take-home pay. Second, list out all your expected spending and saving targets. Third, you subtract those targets from your income until you hit exactly 0. And finally, track your results and adjust as real life inevitably happens. Now, Fidelity is quick to note that while this gives you ultimate, highly granular control of your finances, it does take serious time and planning. It's a high-effort system, particularly if you're a freelancer or you have a fluctuating income, where you actually have to calculate your lowest expected earnings just to establish a safe baseline. All right, on to section 4, the Dave Ramsey debate. While zero-based budgeting is incredibly effective, it's probably most famously championed by the well-known financial personality Dave Ramsey. And his strict philosophy actually draws pretty heavily on this 18th century wisdom from Ben Franklin, a place for everything and everything in its place. Ramsey expands that idea to mean a wallet for every dollar. His followers often use a literal cash stuffing method, meaning they put physical cash into labeled envelopes for things like groceries and entertainment. Or they track it digitally via his Every Dollar app, which will run you $99 a year. The rule is simple. When an envelope is empty, you stop spending, period. But during times of real financial crisis, Ramsey takes a highly radical stance. He famously advised a caller whose husband had just lost his job that it was better to halt mortgage payments for up to 5 months rather than compromise on basic survival. His perspective is absolute, pure triage. You prioritize food and bare minimum necessities over debt obligations, even your home loan, if your back is totally against the wall. Now, this creates a really stark contrast in the personal finance world. Ramsey completely dismisses credit counseling, basically viewing all of it as a credit wrecker, and pushes for that extreme triage approach. On the flip side, sources like Debt.org strongly push back. They warn that willfully stiffing your mortgage causes enormous, long-lasting credit damage. Debt.org argues that nonprofit credit counseling is actually a highly valuable professional lifeline. They say it can help you craft personalized recovery plans without completely destroying your financial reputation. It's a fascinating split in philosophies, and it really highlights just how differently the experts advise handling a true financial emergency. And that leads us nicely into Section 5. Building your emergency fund. Because regardless of which side of that Ramsey debate resonates with you, financial experts universally agree on one thing: having a safety net is non-negotiable. Trillium Credit Union provides a fantastic timeline for building this out. They explain that you shouldn't panic and get overwhelmed trying to save 6 months of living expenses on day one. You start small. Save a $1,000 buffer for those immediate hiccups, like that broken dishwasher or flat tire. Once that starter fund is locked in, then you systematically build up to a robust 3 to 6 months of living expenses. And if you want absolute maximum peace of mind, personal finance expert Suze Orman actually recommends stretching that to 8 full months of expenses to protect against severe, prolonged job loss. But crucially, we have to talk about exactly where that money needs to live. This safety net must be stored in a liquid savings account or a money market account. You absolutely must avoid putting this specific emergency fund into the stock market. Why? Because stocks are volatile. It's that simple. Your cash could easily lose 20% of its value right at the exact moment you lose your job and need the money the most. Accessibility and absolute stability are your only goals here, not chasing high returns. Finally, let's wrap things up with Section 6, choosing your perfect system. We've covered a vast amount of ground in this explainer today. Using the penny hoarder's logic, you can pretty easily match your primary financial pain point with its corresponding method. Look, if you want simplicity, go with the 50-30-20 rule. If you really need to pay off debt aggressively, buckle down and try zero-based budgeting. If you constantly overspend at restaurants, try the physical cash envelope system. And if detailed tracking just totally overwhelms you, set up a pay-yourself-first automation. Ultimately, you just have to remember that the absolute best budget in the world is simply the one you will consistently use month after month. Because at the end of the day, budgeting is not about restriction. It is about empowerment. It's about protecting your future and intentionally deciding the kind of life you want to build. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder today. When your next paycheck hits, exactly what job will you assign it? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. And hey, happy budgeting!